Hi, my name is Keith Cooper from Northlight Images, and in this video I'm going to address a question I'm asked quite often, and that is, what is the best paper for a particular printer, or what paper works best for particular images? I should say right up front that I'm based in the UK, which means any papers I name are available to me here in the UK. I don't know what's available in the rest of the world. So I'm concentrating more on paper types here in the hope that you'll be able to find something that you can experiment with. I would say that all the papers I'm using here are not famous name papers. Famous name papers count for very little in my opinion. They make you can find some nice papers, but there are far more sources of good quality paper available for your photos. Now, the printer I've got here is a Canon Pro 200. That's a dye-based printer. Although these prints were actually made in the course of my reviews in the last year, so some of these would have been printed on pigment inks, some on dye inks, some on a mix. I'm not going to say which printer they were printed on, because at the level of this video there really is not much difference, and I cover details of paper use in all the individual printer reviews and the associated articles and things that go with them. Anyway, let's start out. Which is the basics? Well, I've produced a video looking at what your basic set of papers should be to start when you get a new printer, if you don't know, and that is basically some of the manufacturer's paper to start with. You don't have to keep using them, but if you start with them, the printer was designed for use with those papers, so you'll know whether you have any problems with the printer setup or things. Remember, you can get printers that are not set up properly out of the box. It's not often it happens, but it can, and if you can reproduce a fault on a manufacturer's paper, they're much more likely to go, yeah, that's okay, and replace the printer for you. But anyway, the key element of which paper goes with which photo is your personal taste. And I'm sorry if you were hoping for some clear-cut answers and recommendations. I never give them, because the key element is always what matters to you and what you like. Now, there are times you might want to use a particular paper for a particular technical reason, but in most photo printing, if you have a choice of papers, it's an artistic and creative choice. And that means that's somewhere where your creative artistic abilities can show as a photographer in printing. It's one reason why printing can make such a big difference to your photography, all of your photography, even the stuff you don't print. But I've covered that elsewhere as well. Anyway, I'll start off with the basic. People say glossy prints. Well, yeah, you often can't go wrong with a nice bright glossy print. Glossy papers are something I tend to use for small prints, because at larger sizes the actual reflective gloss, and I'm presuming you can see some here as I move the print around with the lights here, that can be a problem. Now, a glossy print can look great and can have impact, but it depends on how it's viewed. And I tend to find that the larger prints look better when they're shown when they're printed on a luster paper. Now, there's often not a great deal of difference between them, but if I show a similar example here printed on a luster paper, we have bright colours. The reflections are not so obvious. Large prints, if I'm asked to produce, say, a 4-foot by 6-foot print for an office, I'll almost certainly print it on something like this, on a luster paper rather than a gloss paper. A large sheet of gloss paper doesn't work that well. And from an image quality point of view, there's not necessarily that much difference, although I've noticed there's a difference between luster, semi-gloss, semi-matte. There's a whole continuum of paper grades there that make a difference. In terms of content, glossy images and luster tend to go bright, colourful. So that's a luster paper. That's a beach at, where was that? That's Beer on the south coast in the UK. Now, that's a bright, colourful picture. The tonal range you get on glossier papers is greater than matte papers, and intermediate types as well. So you need to understand how your image is going to look. But that's a classic sort of holiday photo on a picture, on a paper that, as I see, there's not too much reflection now. That would go okay in a frame. That would look quite reasonable. Now, occasionally, for impact, I want ultra glossy. Now, this is just where an image suits it, and it's often an image with bright light. Here's an image produced on a metallic paper. Now, I'll try and move this around so you can get a bit of a feel for it, but the real bits where it shows are in these very bright colours and lights. They have a luminescent feel to them. Some would say it's a bit gimmicky, and it is, but it's a way of doing prints that have real impact. But once again, it's the type of image that you choose will make the choice as to whether a particular paper suits that image or not. So that one, nighttime shots, they look great on things like this. There's another glossy, this is done on a metallic, this flower. This small flower, only about that big, and the colours, the metallic paper, gives an almost luminescent glow to the bright colours of this little flower. Looks really nice. I'm really unsure of how much you'll actually see in the video, but I'll move it around a bit there, so hopefully you can get a bit of a feel. That's on a metallic paper when I was explaining. The black is lovely and black. That's one other thing about glossier type papers, the blacks tend to be blacker. Now, that's not always a good thing depending on the image. You have a limited range on any paper between the brightest part of the image, which is the paper white, and the black, which is as black as your particular printer can manage, and that's the black there. Now that varies with paper type, and the tonal range that you see, or the dynamic range that you see on a screen, is always much greater than a print. It's one reason why what you see on a screen can never properly match a print. Now, I've addressed that elsewhere in terms of making your prints match your screen and why you can't actually do it, and why it doesn't matter. That's quite a strong tonal range. One of the ways to look at how all these different images work with different types of paper is to use a test image. Now, here's the test image on this screen. Now, the screen is set quite a low brightness, although on a dull day like this, it's probably still coming out a bit bright on the video. It's this test image. This is the test image printed on a matte art paper. And the tonal range on this screen is nowhere near what I can get on this. This is much reduced. This is much larger, I should say, than what we're getting here. Here is a version of the print printed on a luster paper, and we have the differences between them there. What I would say is, if you're unsure about an image on a particular paper, get to know this test image, print it, and how the different aspects of it come out on your prints will give you a good feel for how your images are going to come out. I always suggest with a new paper starting off with a test image like this, and I've got a video that looks at the test image, using it, and all kinds of things like that, as well as written articles on the Northlight site. But there we have a test image, and this is how I decide what a paper looks like. It gives me a clue as to what sorts of image are going to work on that paper, and whether they're even worth trying. Now, this next one, this is a matte paper. This is a matte, fairly bright paper. This panoramic was printed on the small Canon G650. Not normally a printer you'd think of for doing large prints, but it does work. This is a dull day in the Lake District. There is not a great deal of tonal range. If I printed this on a gloss paper, these bits of tree would come out very black. They'd come out very dark. I don't necessarily want that. So think about which aspects of the image you want to look different ways when you're doing stuff like this. Now, matte needn't have low dynamic range, low tonal range. This is on a poster board. This is on a matte poster board. It's an image that is relatively subdued in its colour. Here's the same image printed on a card. Now you can see there's actually quite a difference. Much of the difference comes from a choice of profile and the paper. This is a bright white matte paper. This is a warm white art paper, and the tonal differences are quite distinctive. Neither of these is incorrect, neither of them is necessarily the right version. They are different interpretations of the same image. Now, I like the muted colours on this, but I also like this as an image. It's up to you what you think is best, which you like the most. Now, in general, with matte papers and colour images, this is the sort of image that works well. This is on a textured art paper. This is on the Oregon coast at Cannon Beach. And the colours that I've got are very muted, very washed out. They work really well on a paper like this. I don't want the punch that you would get from printing an image like this on a glossy paper. I dread to think what an image like this would look like on a metallic paper. It'd be interesting to try, but it really doesn't suit the feel I want for the print. And that's an important thing. When you're printing your images, you're conveying emotion. And this conveys the emotion of that. It's just after sunset, mist has come in on the beach, on the Pacific coast. I want a particular feel to the print, and the paper helps me here, makes a difference. Another one printed on a matte paper would be this image here. Now, this is storm front coming in. This is in Colorado, and this really is a driving along a deserted road thinking, oh, that'll look interesting, that view. Then noticing these trees and driving along another 50 yards to line the trees up with the storm front and taking the photo out of the car window. It was starting to rain, and anyone who's followed my work for long will know I don't like getting wet. But that has for years been one of my favourite images. It sums up once of the flat, high bits you get in Colorado. It has the feel I want for the image, the feel I want to convey in it, and that's on a matte art paper. Once again, I have printed this on glossy papers, and there's just too much contrast in it. Now, you may like that sort of contrast, in which case print it on whatever paper you like, but think about the paper. Just in case you think you only ever get dull papers, dull prints off matte papers, here's another matte paper, and here's a view also taken, fall colours in Colorado, printed on a smooth white matte paper. The colours are quite strong. It's a push to get the tonal range because you tend to get a wider gamut on luster papers, gloss papers. But a matte paper here, even though the gamut is reduced, it's not actually a problem. I've printed this on glossy papers as well, and it's just a little bit too much for my liking. Once again, depends what you like. Now that to me is a bit of Colorado, as is that a bit of Colorado. It's one of the reasons I like going there. Look forward to one time again in the future. I'll just round off on a quick look at black and white, because black and white, once again, is all about how you want the images to look. There is an image printed on a matte paper. Soft stone, the steps at Wells Cathedral. Stone is a sort of soft, warmish stone. I've printed it on an art paper. I don't want really sharp, high contrast look to the picture. An alternate architectural image, modern architecture, wacky angles. Yeah, I want that high contrast. I want oomph. I want impact out of it. Print this image on this paper, and it looks a little harsh. Print this image on this paper, and it looks a little soft. It doesn't have the angularity I'm looking to emphasize. As I say, it's all about how you want your picture to look, and there is no hard and fast rule to deciding which is the best paper. Sorry if you were looking for an answer to what the best paper, well, you probably wouldn't have made it this far through the video, but if you were looking for it, I don't have one. My key tip would be understand how an image like this prints on your chosen papers, and that will give you a bit of a guide to it. Now, I hope this has been of use. I cover all kinds of printers and other aspects of photography in the videos. Please do subscribe to the channel if you found it useful, and ask questions. I'm always interested in the comments and questions I get on these videos. They often give me ideas for other videos, for things that people have asked. So thank you very much.